One of the most iconic characters from the Five Nights at Freddy's series is the puppet or marionette if you want to be fancy. Originally having made its debut in FNaF 2, the puppet has made multiple appearances since then and is a vital character within the ever-sprawling story of FNaF. Today we're going to be taking a stroll down memory lane as we look at every prominent appearance of the puppet across the FNaF franchise, between the games and books. We'll also, of course, be touching on the lore and story of the puppet for anyone who's interested in that. But without further ado, let's get started. As mentioned before, the puppet first appeared in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which released on November 11th, 2014. In the game, the puppet resides in the prize corner of the restaurant, and in order to keep the puppet from killing us, we have to wind the music box that keeps the puppet dormant. However, if you happen to neglect the music box and let it dwindle, the puppet will rise from its home and make its way towards your office before inevitably jump-scaring you, resulting in a game over. But alas, there's more to this character than meets the eye. During the in-between cutscenes you get throughout FNaF 2, where you see through the eyes of the big man himself, Freddy Fazbear, the puppet will appear in front of you, staring eerily upon you with its glowing white pupils and following your gaze if you try and turn your head away. We also see the puppet in multiple of FNaF 2's secret death minigames. In the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame, we see the puppet give presents to 4 dead children, before giving each child a mascot mask. In the Save Them minigame, where you play as Withered Freddy, the puppet guides you to where Purple Guy is, resulting in Purple Guy jumping you. Lastly, for FNaF 2, although we don't see the 8-bit puppet sprite from the other minigames, in the Give Cake minigame, where you play as a version of Freddy giving cake to children, there is a child outside the building that Purple Guy pulls up to in his purple car, before getting out and killing the child. After Purple Guy has driven away, we get a jump scare from the puppet. Moving on from FNaF 2, the next time we see the puppet is in the very next game. FNaF 3 released in 2015 on March 2nd, mere months after the second game. During the night gameplay, it's possible to see the puppet standing at the end of the hall in Cam 08, which also features the puppet's mask on the wall. If you don't change your camera fast enough, the phantom version of the puppet will appear in your office, sliding very closely into view and taking up your entire screen as it screeches in your face. The puppet makes another appearance in 8-bit form in this game as well, via the secret mini-games you play in order to achieve Happiest Day, which in turn gets you the good ending of FNaF 3. Speaking of Happiest Day, it's that mini-game where you play as a sprite wearing the puppet's mask. After having completed all the other secret mini-games, you can now give a 5th spirit cake, followed by all the other spirits disappearing, allowing the masks to slowly fall to the floor, although you'll notice that the puppet's falls much slower. Also, the puppet technically appears in the Mangle 8-bit minigame as well, in the form of this big puppet silhouette that's hunched over and crying. Next is FNaF 4, which was released on July 23rd, 2015. Technically speaking, the puppet doesn't have a canonical appearance in this game. The puppet doesn't actually appear in the base version of FNaF 4. However, it does appear in the Halloween DLC of the game in the form of Nightmarion. Nightmarion is the character that cosmetically replaces Nightmare in the Halloween DLC, much like how Nightmare Balloon Boy replaces Plushtrap. The mechanic for Nightmarion remains the same as Nightmare's. If you see Nightmarion in the hallway and don't close the door, you'll get a creepy still image jump scare that crashes your game. Now onto FNaF World, which released in 2016 on January 21st. This game features every version of the puppet up to FNaF 4, including the original puppet from FNaF 2, Phantom Puppet from FNaF 3, and Nightmarion from FNaF 4. Much like most characters in the game, you unlock Adventure Puppet and Adventure Phantom Puppet through random encounters, sort of Pokemon style. However, Nightmarion is actually unlocked in the Halloween area of the game that was added in Update 2. In order to unlock Adventure Nightmarion, you have to successfully complete the Foxy.exe minigame that you can play in that DLC. Adventure Marionette's moveset consists of Prize Ball 2, Mystery Box, and Escape Key. Adventure Phantom Marionette's moveset consists of Jump Scare, Hot Cheese 2, and Mystery Box. Lastly, Adventure Nightmarion's moveset consists of Prize Ball 2, Bubble Breath, and Fourth Wall, making her one of the only 2 playable characters in the game capable of Fourth Wall. Next up, we have Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, or FNaF 6 for simplicity's sake. FNaF 6 came out on December 4th, 4th, 2017. In the game, we don't necessarily see the marionette in a traditional sense. Instead of being a tall, lanky, white masked puppet, we get to meet Lefty. How are Lefty and the puppet one and the same, you ask? Well, in one of the rare images you can randomly get while playing the game, you'll notice that inside Lefty's right arm are what look to be white stripes, very reminiscent of the puppet spiral stripes. This is because the puppet is, in fact, inside Lefty. Lefty is an animatronic specifically designed to capture the puppet inside its suit and keep it docile by playing a lullaby, much like how the music box in FNaF 2 kept the puppet at bay. But that's not the only place we see the puppet in Pizzeria Simulator. One of the many attractions you can buy for your pizzeria in FFPS is the security puppet, which certainly looks like the puppet, albeit a more stylized design. When interacting with the security puppet, you'll actually be able to play an 8-bit minigame, where you take the role of the marionette. In this game, your goal is to make sure a child with a green bracelet doesn't reach the exit, but the first few times you play the game, you'll notice that no kid with a green bracelet appears. However, upon playing the game a third time, the gift box you reside in now has other boxes stacked on top of it, preventing the puppet from getting out. Oh, and what do you know, there's a child with a green bracelet that's been locked outside of the building. Once you're finally free, the child outside slowly fades away, and when we go outside to find her, the marionette gradually starts to break down due to the rain. We do find the child, but by the time we get there, she's already been killed and left in the back alley. Upon reaching the child's body, the puppet falls down next to her, and the minigame ends. You may not realize it at first, but this is actually a different perspective of the Give Cake minigame from FNaF 2, where we saw a purple guy kill a child outside of a Freddy's location before driving away. Next on the chopping block, Ultimate Custom Night. Ultimate Custom Night released in 2018 on June 27th, and amongst the many characters that try to kill you in the game, the puppet of course makes an appearance. The original puppet from FNaF 2, Nightmarion from FNaF 4, and Lefty from FNaF 6. This game also gives each of the aforementioned characters voices for the first time. Although we did hear Lefty hush us to death in Pizzeria Simulator, she's now been given real lines just as her counterparts have.
The others are under my protection.
This time, death cannot save you.
Shh. It will all be over soon.
Much like FNaF 2, in order to defend against the puppet, you have to wind the music box to keep her at bay. Nightmarion will appear in your office if your cursor hovers in the same spot for too long. All you have to do is move your cursor and he'll disappear. Lastly is Lefty, who sits in the closet adjacent to the left hallway and will only move if the office becomes too noisy or too hot. Lowering noise or heat won't decrease Lefty's agitation level, and shutting the doors won't protect you from getting jump scared. The only way to calm Lefty down is to turn on the global music box, which will also help with the normal music box, but it also uses more power. As far as mainline entry games go, that's all the important ones for the puppet. Now yes, the puppet makes an appearance in the VR Help Wanted games, but those games tend to just be recreations of previous games, like how FNaF 2 in the first Help Wanted is, you know, FNaF 2. But VR and a little spookier. The puppet also doesn't really have much story importance in the modern era of FNaF, at least at the time of making this video. But that doesn't mean we're done with them just yet, cause I did mention at the beginning of this that we'd also be talking about the puppet's appearances in the books. Published in 2015 on December 17th, Five Nights at Freddy's The Silver Eyes is the first novel in a trilogy written by Scott Cawthon and Kira Breed-Wisley. It's also the first ever FNaF book in general. Now, while the story itself doesn't feature the puppet, it does feature a particular character heavily tied to the puppet, that being Charlie. Spoilers, but the child soul that possesses the marionette in the games is named Charlie, or Charlotte Emily, the daughter of Henry Emily, William Afton's business partner. In this novel trilogy, however, Charlie doesn't possess the puppet when Afton kills her. Instead, Henry creates multiple lifelike humanoid robots that basically perfectly pass off as actual humans, with each one designed to represent what would be different stages of Charlie's life from when she was a child to adulthood. Yeah, those books kind of go off the deep end, but it's what happens, so we just have to deal with it. Anyway, at the end of the fourth closet, Charlie and her evil doppelganger, Negative Charlie, I'm kidding. interesting. It's actually the adult Charlie that Henry made, but after he created it, Afton stole it, and he turned it into the book's version of Circus Baby. Again, kind of weird stuff going on here, but either way, they both die when Charlie activates an endoskeleton that impales both of them with a very big knife. However, all hope is not lost because at the very end of the story, when John is visiting Charlie's grave, he sees what looks to be yet another Charlie standing nearby beneath a tree. Okay, but what about the actual puppet? Does it appear in the books at all? Well, yes. In the Fazbear Frights stingers, those are the epilogues at the very end of every Fazbear Frights novel, Lawson goes to his department's evidence locker where they're keeping evidence and/or junk from the FNaF 6 fire. He grabs a particular item that survived the fire, that being the puppet's mask. Later in the Stitch Wraith stingers, Detective Lawson hears a voice in his head telling him to press on after Afton, who, of course, has more or less returned from the grave once again. It's implied that the voices Lawson is hearing are coming from the puppet mask. It even says to Lawson, "Take me to him." When Lawson confronts the Afton amalgamation once again, the puppet springs to life with newly grown limbs, and takes control of Afton's mechanical body, forcing him to pull himself apart before falling into a lake, marking the end of William Afton once and for all. The puppet also makes an appearance in the scrap story You're the Band, one of 3 stories that was part of Fazbear Frights number 12, Felix the Shark. Each of these stories in this novel were scrapped and aren't canon, which is a shame because You're the Band is actually pretty interesting. The story centers around a mother and her child named Timmy, who's been acting strange ever since his mother Sylvia ordered him a Freddy Fazbear mask from an auction site for his upcoming Freddy-themed birthday party. Fast forward towards the end of the story, and Timmy's mother teams up with Mike, the security guard of the old enclosed Freddy Fazbear's. Now working together, they head to the old Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria in order to save little Timmy. They find Timmy performing on stage with the other animatronics, but when his mother approaches, black and white striped tentacles emerge from the cracks in the walls and wrap around her. While that's happening, Mike is able to save Timmy by putting the Freddy mask back on him briefly, which transfers the soul that had possessed Timmy back into the mask. The puppet finally reveals itself and goes to attack Mike, but then the actual Freddy Fazbear marches on stage with his head now returned to the rest of his body. Afterwards, the puppet retreats. That, my friends, is every prominent appearance of the puppet over the last 10 years of Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, mind you, I did leave out some little snippets here and there, like Freddy in Space 2 and 5 Laps at Freddy's. The former isn't canon, and the latter isn't actually out yet at the time of making this video, though even then, it's a racing game. In any case, the last thing we have to go over is the general story of the marionette. I'm going to try and be as unbiased as possible, but fair warning, some of it might be up to interpretation. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but the soul that possesses the puppet is Henry Emily's daughter, Charlotte Emily. One faithful rainy night at a Freddy's location, she was locked outside by a group of other children. A drunken William Afton who was driving to the location noticed the young girl stuck outside and proceeded to get a little silly idea inside his head. Afterwards, he drove away, leaving Charlie's body in the back alley where the security puppet specifically created to make sure Charlie was safe found her. But because of the heavy rain, the puppet began to slowly break down, eventually falling next to the deceased Charlie, which is when Charlie's soul possesses the character. The general idea of the puppet is that she is a caretaker and protector of the other spirits. When we see the puppet in FNaF 2's Save Them death minigame, that's her enlisting the help of Freddy to try and stop William Afton from killing more children. Obviously that failed, but hey, it was worth a shot. Generally speaking, it's also likely that the marionette helped achieve Happiest Day in FNaF 3 somehow. I mentioned the puppet sprite earlier. That is most likely literally Charlotte or the puppet, and this is her trying to help free the souls of William Afton's victims. Or not actually. It's a whole thing. I made other videos on it if you want to check those out. Either way, the puppet story comes to a close in Pizzeria Simulator when, at the end of the final night of the game, the place goes up in flames with everyone inside. This is when we hear Henry's badass speech, and he even directly references his daughter, i.e. Charlie. I hope you enjoyed this little collected history of the puppet from Five Nights at Freddy's. It's the first in a series I hope to do, breaking down the many appearances of different characters throughout the series. So if you really enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate a like, a comment, and if you're really feeling gracious, you could even hit that subscribe button. In the description below, you can find a link to my Twitter profile, and a link to my official Discord server where I post teasers as to what I'm working on and when I'm streaming. Beyond that though, I hope you have a good day or a good night, whichever it is for you. Either way, I will see you all next time. Peace out.